Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Lei, and you're listening to BullishBooks, where we dig into the ideas that actually move the needle in business and in life. Let me ask you something. Think about the last big problem you tried to solve. In your business, your career, maybe even your personal life. How long did it take before you jumped straight into solution mode? Be honest. Did you stop to really ask yourself, am I actually solving the right problem? Or did you just hit the ground running with the most obvious answer? If you're like most people, and honestly, like most senior executives, you jumped. And here's the uncomfortable truth. That instinct, that let's just go fix it energy, is one of the most expensive habits in business. A McKinsey survey found that 72% of senior executives feel bad strategic decisions happen at least as often as good ones in their organizations. And the culprit usually isn't a lack of brainpower, it's a lack of process. Today, I want to talk about a book called Solvable by Arnaud Chevalier and Albrecht Enders. These two spent years coaching senior executives across every industry you can think of, and what they kept finding was striking. Most strategic failures weren't failures of intelligence or effort. They were failures of process, specifically how problems get framed, explored, and decided. That observation is the foundation of everything in this episode. The framework they built is called FRED, Frame, Explore, Decide. And we're going to unpack it through one of the best metaphors I've seen used to explain strategic thinking, Dragon Quest. Yes, the video game. Stay with me. This is going to change how you approach hard problems. So here's the setup. Dragon Quest is one of the most iconic RPG franchises ever made. The story is simple but irresistible. An evil dragon lord steals the ball of light, plunging the world into darkness. A hero sets out, battles monsters, collects weapons and wisdom, and eventually confronts the dragon lord. And here's what struck me when I started thinking about this. That storyline isn't just a game mechanic. It's one of the most elegant frameworks for understanding how to solve a hard problem. Before the hero could even begin, they had to answer 4 questions. Who am I, and what can I actually do? What am I trying to achieve? The treasure. What single obstacle is standing between me and that goal? The dragon. And what is the one overarching question my entire journey needs to answer? The quest. Without clarity on all 4? The hero wanders, fights the wrong monsters, maybe charges at the Dragon Lord too early, with the wrong weapons. Sound familiar? Fred gives you the map. Let's walk through it. The first phase is frame. Before you touch a single solution, you write out what's called the HTDQ sequence. Hero, treasure, dragon, quest. 4 elements, 5 minutes, and it's genuinely the most valuable 5-minute investment you can make before starting any major initiative. Here's a story that makes this concrete. In 1661, King Louis XIV ordered the construction of the Palace of Versailles, complete with over 2,400 fountains. One small problem: Versailles sat above all nearby water sources, and the hydraulic technology of the era hadn't improved since the Roman Empire. Over 3 decades, 30,000 workers dug canals and built aqueducts trying to supply those fountains. They never fully succeeded. But a team of fountaineers solved the problem with whistles. When the king approached a fountaineer would hear a colleague's signal and open the water flow. The moment the king's party passed, they shut it off. The fountains appeared to work. The king was delighted. What was the difference? The engineers were solving, how do we bring enough water to the fountains? The fountaineers were solving, how do we make the fountains achieve their desired effect? A few words, that's all it took. And this is exactly why every word in your quest statement carries weight. Write it down, read it out loud, and ask yourself, does this actually capture what I'm trying to achieve? Or have I already unconsciously narrowed the solution space before I've even begun? Once you've drafted your HTDQ sequence, you stress test it with 4 rules. The backpack rule: pack only what you need. Every piece of information in one part of the sequence should connect to another part. If something appears in your hero section but never links to the dragon or quest, cut it. Bloated frames are worse than lean ones. The rabbit rule: Nothing should suddenly appear in your quest that wasn't introduced earlier. If your quest mentions social media, but your dragon never did, your thinking has a hole in it. The Dolly rule: clone your language. In problem solving, synonyms create ambiguity. If you say clients in the hero, don't switch to customers in the dragon and buyers in the quest. Same thing, same word, every time. And the Watson rule: examine your assumptions. In 2014, French national rail operator SNCF ordered 341 brand new trains at 15 billion euros. When they arrived, the trains were too wide for 1,300 platforms across the country. Why? The engineers had measured platforms built in the last 30 years and assumed those were representative. The older, narrower platforms were completely overlooked. 50 million euros in modifications later. A painful lesson. Don't assume the obvious is correct. Check it. Now here's a step I see almost everyone skip, and it's one of the most important in the whole framework. Before generating any solutions, diagnose the actual root cause. Think of it as the difference between popping aspirin for a headache versus getting the MRI. You want the MRI. A why map is a visual breakdown of potential root causes. You keep asking why to go deeper, and what else to uncover new categories. The structure should be MECE, mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. No gaps, no overlaps. From my time in bioinformatics, I can tell you this is the exact same logic you use when mapping failure modes in a data analysis pipeline. You don't stop at the first plausible explanation. You build the map, then you test each hypothesis, and critically, you look for the evidence that could prove you wrong first. Confirmation bias is one of the most expensive shortcuts in strategic thinking, and the only antidote is deliberately hunting for the reasons you might be mistaken. Once your diagnosis is solid, go back and tighten your HTDQ. Your dragon should be more precise. Your quest should be better scoped. Now you're ready for phase 2. Explore. This is about opening the solution space before you close it. Most people, even experienced executives, stop at 2 or 3 alternatives, often just one. The how map is the antidote. Where a why map asks, why is this happening? A how map asks, how might we achieve this? And that word might matters more than it sounds. How should we implies you're already narrowing. How might we creates psychological space for unconventional ideas that your mental filters would otherwise eliminate before they reach conscious thought. The classic example, a building manager whose tenants complained the elevators were too slow. The obvious options were speeding them up or installing more, both expensive, both complex. But change the question. Instead of how might we speed up the elevators, ask how might we make users happy with the speed of the elevators? Suddenly, a whole new branch of solutions appears. Mirrors in the lobby, screens showing news, music. Installing mirrors cost a fraction of a motor upgrade, and it worked beautifully. And alongside your how map, deliberately relax your constraints. What if cost weren't a factor? What if you had 6 months instead of 6 weeks? What if you could partner with a competitor? These questions tear down the invisible walls that conventional thinking builds around your solution space. Keep generating options until you're genuinely excited about at least 2 of them. If everyone agrees on the first option immediately, that's a warning sign, not a green light. Before comparing alternatives, you need to define your criteria, and do it before you've emotionally committed to an answer. Because once you have a favorite, criteria setting becomes rationalization rather than reasoning. Research from Duke and Georgia Tech shows that decision makers can omit nearly half of the criteria they'd later consider relevant, and those omitted criteria turn out to be almost as important as the ones they named up front. This isn't a stupidity problem. It's a process problem. Julia Galef's scout mindset is the right mental posture here. Approach your criteria like a scout mapping territory, not a soldier defending a position. Scouts look for what's true. Soldiers look for what's useful to their argument. Once your criteria are set, assign weights. Not everything matters equally. Even rough weights on a 1 to 5 scale force you to articulate what you actually prioritize, and resist giving everything equal weight just because it feels fair. It rarely reflects reality. Phase 3. Decide. The decision matrix is the core tool here, a structured grid where each row is an alternative, each column is a criterion, and each cell scores how well that alternative performs. Weighted scores produce a ranking. Simple, and remarkably rare in practice. The matrix forces consistency. You're applying the same yardstick to every option. It doesn't guarantee the right answer, but it dramatically reduces the chance of choosing based on something you've unconsciously overweighted, or of being swayed by whoever argues the loudest in the room. There's an interactive version of this in the full article on BullishBooks, where you can drag the weight sliders and watch the rankings shift in real time. Link is in the description. One flag. If any alternative scores highest on every criterion with zero trade-offs, treat that as a red flag. Either you've missed important criteria, or you're making unrealistic assumptions. There is no free lunch. When two alternatives both feel inadequate, that tension is often a signal that a better third option hasn't been designed yet. In the 1980s, a BMW engineer named Max wanted to take his family on vacation. His sporty sedan was too small for the kids' bikes. His estate wagon handled terribly. Neither was acceptable. So he cut off the back of a 3 Series and built a custom estate body on it. He brought the prototype to BMW management, they launched an official project, and the BMW Touring became one of the brand's most popular models. Resist accepting the trade-offs you're presented with as inevitable. Once you've made the best possible decision, you still have to bring people with you. Aristotle's 3 pillars are the toolkit here: logos, ethos, and pathos. The logical case, your credibility and track record, and the emotional resonance of your message. None of these works alone. Jonathan Haidt frames it perfectly. The rational mind is a rider sitting on top of an elephant, the emotional, intuitive system that actually determines whether you move. You can guide the elephant, but you cannot drag it somewhere it doesn't want to go. One counterintuitive point: if your recommendation looks perfect with zero acknowledged trade-offs, sophisticated stakeholders will be suspicious. Acknowledge the weaknesses. Intellectual honesty is what builds trust, not polished certainty. Even after execution begins, guard against what psychologists call planned continuation bias, the tendency to stick with a chosen course, even when new evidence says you should change. The Torrey Canyon, a supertanker that ran aground in 1967, causing the worst oil spill in history at the time, is the most dramatic example. A sleep-deprived captain countermanded a correct course correction because he was behind schedule. The risk felt abstract. The deadline felt urgent. The ship ran aground. The antidote is thinking in probabilities. After making your decision, ask, on a scale of 0 to 100, how confident am I? Write it down. Ask what evidence would change your mind. And structure your early commitments as two-way doors wherever possible, so you can course correct before the stakes get too high. Here's the pattern I keep coming back to from my time in research and from watching businesses up close. People skip the framing. They skip the diagnosis. They jump straight to solutions and evaluate them on gut feel. And then they wonder why nothing sticks. The Boeing 737. Max disaster is the most catastrophic version of this failure. Facing competitive pressure, executives chose to rapidly update an existing aircraft without properly framing their options, without honestly diagnosing the technical constraints, without genuinely exploring alternatives. The result was a flight control system that pilots weren't even told about, a solution engineered in secret to a problem that was never properly defined. The consequences were devastating. So here's the bottom line. Every hard problem you face has the structure of a Dragon Quest, a hero with real constraints and real capabilities, a treasure worth pursuing, a dragon, one actual obstacle, and a quest, the one question your entire effort must answer. The difference between the entrepreneur who breaks through and the one who keeps grinding in circles isn't raw intelligence or sheer willpower, it's process. Did they frame the right problem? Did they find the actual root cause, not just the symptom? Did they genuinely explore the solution space, or did they default to the most familiar answer? Did they decide based on evidence, or did they follow the hippo, the highest paid person's opinion? Your process determines your outcomes, not your IQ, your process. Here's your homework. Take the most pressing problem you're working on right now and write out your HTDQ sequence. Hero, treasure, dragon, quest. 4 bullets. Do it before you go to sleep tonight. Just the act of writing it down will change how you see the problem. The full article, including that interactive decision matrix, is live on BullishBooks. Link is in the description. And if this episode gave you something useful, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps more people find the show, and it genuinely means a lot. I'm Lei, and I'll see you in the next one.